Thank you, Simon, and Kayla and Linka for that. How do Asian business leaders, as we organize this, how do Asian business leaders see and prioritize LGBT inclusion in their businesses? What motivates them to do so, and indeed, how do they see this evolving over the coming years? Well, in a slightly different format, I'm going to ask two young professionals to come up onto the stage and put their own questions to an Asian business leader. I'm not going to be moderating this. We seem to have 4 chairs. There were only meant to be 3, so I will still sit up here and keep the time. But let me introduce the Asian business leader first, who's going to be answering the questions, and that is Keshav Suri, who's the executive director from the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. Do please join us.
Hi.
Great to see you. Have a seat here, I think.
Right underneath that one.
I'm not quite sure where we're meant to be sitting, but do sit there, yes. Okay. And Keshav is the CEO, the executive director of a luxury hotel group, and of course, as you've probably read in the bios, he has been a prominent advocate of equality for all, but also for the LGBT cause, and in fact, one of the prominent campaigners for the overturning of Section 377 in India. Thank you for joining us. Let me bring our two protagonists up. Lini Zurlia, who's the advocacy officer for ASEAN SOGIE, the sexual orientation and gender identity and experience group caucus in Manila, based in Manila. Could you come up, Lini? Where is Lini? There you are. Lovely, wonderful. Please welcome Lini.
Hi. I'm Keshav.
Hi.
Thanks, Lini.
Hi.
And last but not least, Ren Naying, who is the Business and Diversity Officer for Beijing, the Beijing LGBT Center. Do welcome her as well, please. Come on.
Hi, Charles.
Thank you. So I am going to keep out of this, and I'm going to let these guys ask the questions of our guest, Keshav. So we start, please, with Lini. Thank you.
From me?
Yes, do start. And I'm going to let you do it, and I'm just going to watch, and I'll intervene if I need to.
Okay.
And I'm going to keep the time. So over to you, Lini.
Yeah. As a protagonist, as you said, I'm going to ask you many, many questions. From key point of questions, and then key point of discussions. And then I will end up with closing questions. Hope you be okay with that. Yeah. Okay, so as influential person, businessman in India and in the LGBTI community, do you think would be any chance that you could influence other business person and drive the inclusion policies of other companies and hotels forward in Asia, particularly in Southeast Asia, since I work in Southeast Asia region?
Hi, can you hear me? Am I audible?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for that lovely introduction and feeding into my ego of being influential and savior of the queers back in India. Filing for Section 377. No, I did all those, yes, but there were a lot of other people who did that. I'm just, one of the many. I never get used to, compliments. I think it's an Asian thing that, we're always shy and humble. When I started talking about inclusion back in India, it was funny because, can I share a story, if that's okay?
Sure.
There was this event that happens in India every year called Niti Aayog. And it's basically where you take a lot of CEOs and you take a lot of people that are supposedly young and put them in a room, and there were like 200 of us, and we present to the Prime Minister of the country. And I was subdivided into a group that said New India 2022, and in that group, I decided to scream for the gay agenda only. I don't know why. And and then this was way before 377 got scrapped. And then I realized how companies were a little clamped up when it came to having tough conversations, especially about LGBTQI inclusion. And then I kept on repeating my points again and again and again, hoping that they would bring it up. Finally, they did present in front of the Prime Minister, and of course, they did not bring up anything related to what I had said on LGBTQ. So I decided to ask a question. I was like, I'm still going to do this. I'm still going to push the gay agenda. And I got up and I said, what can the private and the public sector do to mainstream this highly underrepresented community? And I spelt it out. I said lesbian, gay, bisexual, intersex, trans. And I saw on the stage, one person looked at the other person, looked at the other person, looked at the other person, till the last person did not know where to look because she had only air to look at. So finally, she answered the question. And these are people in my group, mind you. They're people that I've already tutored what to answer. So she answered to the best of her capabilities. It's on YouTube, this. And there's like this giant pan on our Prime Minister, who's now currently our Prime Minister again's face. And this is where I realized that how sometimes it's difficult for corporations and companies to really, pick up difficult conversations. And at that time, it was difficult. The minute Section 377 got read down, you had immense amount of companies that came out in support. And that finally put the rainbow flag and made it their marketing agenda. Which is great, fine, but I mean, I think that what needs to be, of course, paid respect to are companies that actually took the risk, even though there was a sort of legal implication, though technically the law did not say that you couldn't run your inclusive practices. The law just said that if you're caught in the act of sex that is beyond procreation, is how you would be basically persecuted and put in jail. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding as well in India at that time, and as well as in the world, as to what exactly the law said. I got to give a shout out to the hotel that we're staying in currently, this Icon Hotel. I think they've been really beautiful. My husband's here, and they have actually given us towels that says Mr. Right. I have no idea why, because he's definitely not Mr. Right for me. And, but I mean, I think that that's really nice that, finally hotels in Asia are actually accepting us as couples and giving us the kind of respect that they do to any heterosexual couple. So I think that maybe instead of me giving ideas, I should be taking ideas.
Do you think that influence, you can push that influence to other Asia regions?
Of course. I don't know if anybody sees this TV show called Handmaid's Tale. Okay, so there is a TV show called Handmaid's Tale, and it's, about Gilead. That's why I'm just seeing the name. And in that, there was this, season 3 is coming out, and there, and then there was this, there was this point where she says that, you have influence, so use your influence. And then she's like, I have only influence up to a point, so you should push the point. Of course we should. There is an association of hotel associations back in India called HAI, and in that, one of the things that I'm trying to basically do is to put trans inclusion as a big part of the hiring in India, because the trans movement in India, I'm not too sure if everyone knows or not know, but Section 377 happened in 2018. That is when it got read down, but that was mainly for lesbian, gay, bisexuals. The trans law came out in 2014 with the Nalsa judgment, and they already got their freedom a while ago, because the trans community is a very historic community in India and is a part of our culture. So this is something that I've been trying to push hotels to do, is to hire more trans people. Even though they have gotten legalities, the societal rejection is huge, in a way that they are basically either given two options, either that they go into sex work or that they beg for money. That's the only options given to transfer so many, and again, the post-colonial hangover, the trans community was completely shunned for so many years. So one of the ways for me to do it is hire a lot of people from the trans community in my own organization, because there is one about talking about inclusion, and there's actually living inclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that companies really need to live and breathe it to actually have it as a part of their DNA. And change comes from top down. So I'm guessing, tops and bottoms, of course. But I'm guessing, change, of course, and change comes from top down, and I feel that I managed to do that. But I think right now the influence has to be to actually push other hospitality chains to not just have it as a marketing technique, but actually live it, actually breathe it. Having more women in your organization does not make you an inclusive company. It makes you a basic company, right? Inclusive and diversity should not be like, oh, I have these many women. No, an inclusive company is a company that actually where you have people from the communities that have been completely eradicated and subjugated to so much of discrimination, like the trans community, like differently abled community, like the acid attack survivors. We have a huge issue of acid attack survivors in India, and I have in my team an acid attack survivor who is trans. And as well as was a sex worker, and she got gang raped, thrown acid on, and the cops did not want to put the person in jail because there was a whole question, how can a sex worker say no? So, I mean, these are the stories that basically can help maybe influence other companies to do the same and to hire from this.
Cool. I just about to ask you about that question, but you answered it already.
Lini, can I
so
just
I'm
suggest? I
gonna
can make
hand
my only
over
intervention, I
to
hope.
Ren.
Naying,
Yeah.
Over to you.
Speak forever.
Hello, Mr. Suri.
Hi.
Yeah, my question is, because like a lot of companies, international corporates, they have been taking leads in DNI, even before the nation state, sometimes in many different countries in the history of LGBTQ movement. And that is also happening in the Asian region now, and you are like, thank you so much for the work that you've been doing. But then in the country, like in Asia, when we are pushing for DNI, sometimes it's usually the multinational corporates who are taking the leadership. And from the post-colonial perspective, it could potentially fall back into the colonial structure that we usually fight very hard against. So how do you think of this dilemma, and how do you envision the private sector in LGBTQ movement, especially the local companies?
So when before 377, the era before 377, actually we've had multiple eras, because if you remember, the High Court had actually read down Section 377 in 2009, and then the Supreme Court overturned the High Court's decision, so we were all shoved back into a closet. But what happened at that time was that the multinational companies, again, because they didn't understand what exactly was 377, it was reversed. The MNCs didn't do much when it comes to inclusive and diverse practices. It was actually a lot of Indian companies like Goddard, Tata, and myself, which actually took upon us to do a lot of conversations on inclusion. Some companies like IBM, for example, did that, but there was such a vast difference between IBM when they did their out and equal for the first time. There were like 30 or 40 companies that came, and they all said that we want to sign a non-disclosure agreement because we don't want to be seen here. Because again, we didn't really understand about the law. And now, of course, everyone is out there doing it openly. I do think that there is a lot that the private sector can do in pushing policies. I came from a background where my parents are really fearless, and they always said that change in India, at least, and I'm not going to comment on the other, comes a lot from entrepreneurs, because we've had issues, various issues with our government, or various issues when it comes to the law not keeping up pace with the kind of population that we have, which is 1.3 billion people. So I think that a lot of times it is left on to companies to be able to push that kind of change. So for example, in my company, and I know that a lot of other companies do the same, is the Mediclaim insurance policy. So we give Mediclaim to our team members. I was the first company and probably the only hotel company that covers same-sex couples. This was even before 377. We also cover sexual reassignment surgeries for trans people. We also cover mental health care for a lot of the trans team members. And so we were one of the first few to do that, and then a lot of the insurance companies, first they were like, we're not going to talk about it openly because we don't want anybody else to get this. But then after that, they were like, you know what, this is something that we're going to be covering. Again, funny enough, considering that the trans movement was far ahead of the LGB movement. When we were talking in the beginning, there was about this conversation about empowering and mainstreaming. And I think that, yes, the companies in there, I think now should be taken up to task a little bit, especially multinational companies that have so many diverse and inclusive ERGs and, you know, leadership programs. India then should be in one of their, because I mean, think about it, it's probably one of the largest LGBTQ populations. So I think it's time that they made the change that they promised us that they would.
Thank you.
Jump in.
Okay. So my other, do you have other questions? Okay. I have another questions. As an activist, I must ask these questions to you. In what way do you think business owners like you and others industries integrate inclusiveness and equality in their policies? Not only, this is your opinion, not only apply in your company. So really, you know, apply these equality policies, not just monetizing LGBTIQ as a trend nowadays. As we can see, the corporate equality index, hundreds of the American and European-based companies part of this index. And when they operate in the country where there are a lot of homophobes and transphobes, they also, you know, they're not doing so much things to push this inclusiveness. So do you have any, you know, thoughts or any opinion to push those companies where they can operate and pushing the inclusiveness in homophobes countries like mine, like Malaysia, like Brunei, for example, and other Southeast Asian country where homosexual is still criminalized?
I would just say stop using those companies.
But they are big companies.
Thank you for that one clap. Yes, thanks.
They are big companies. They are big companies, and they always, you know, compromise with the political system within the government.
And this is where I say that, you know, companies like mine who took the risk should be rewarded. And therefore, all of you, and therefore, all of you, your homework is anywhere there is a Lalit, if you're coming to India, stay in my hotel. I have a hotel in London. It's www.lalit.com. LA, like La Lit, L-A-L-I-T. Support inclusive business. At least you know where your money is going. Your money is going in the right places. It's going to help, you know, acid attack survivors, differently able people, saving the gays in India and the rest of the world, and of course the lesbians, the bisexuals, the trans, and the intersex. I think that, you know, we as a community now have reached a point where we actually have a huge collective bargaining power, and we really can take decisions. I know this whole thing about Brunei happened, and there was this whole campaign that happened against Dorchester hotels, which I'm not going to comment whether it was good or bad, but it forced Dorchester hotels to actually stop having their social media accounts. I don't know if it affected their business or not, but I know that for a long time they did not have any, and I don't know if their you know, social medias are still active or not. But I think that we do have an opportunity now for us to at least be smart enough to support businesses that follow the same ideology as us. And I do think that queer businesses can and have the opportunity to support other queer businesses. I also think that businesses that have a huge amount of budgets on LGBTQ inclusion and just inclusion in general also should then take cognizance of other companies that do the same. And I think that that's the only way, how you push the point and push the influence in a non-threatening way, or then just forget it, just threaten everyone and say that we're not going to give you the business. That's what I did with the insurance company. I said, if you're not going to cover same-sex couples, then I'm going to go towards somebody else.
And you success.
And yes,
Wow,
surprisingly,
okay. Surprisingly,
convincing.
So how about the state? How do you see the space between the private sector and the negotiation with the state about anti-discrimination law,
Yes.
for example, in India?
So, I mean, of course, right now, because of the reading down of Section 377, so there is technically no law now that discriminates LGBTQ people. But that's just, of course, the tip of the iceberg, because it's honestly just saying that, okay, you can't get arrested now for, LGBTQ sex. Beyond that, they have given us nothing. So right now, we are not in a situation where we're even marching towards equal rights, because marriage equality, like for example, right now it's going to be a long process. As far as the state is concerned, so I personally, what we did was that I worked with the chambers of commerce called FICCI, which is Federation of International Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industries, and we're basically walking into some of the policy makers' offices, and I'm like screaming about the LGBTQ agenda. Because listen, I mean, when I walk into a room, it's almost like a purse first. I'm rubbing my sexuality on everyone's face in any case, and I'm proud to do so. So if the politicians have an issue, they can look the other way. Like I said, they can also use another hotel. But I think that, yeah, I mean, there are enough hotels and there are enough restaurants and nightclubs. I mean, for coming to nightclubs, I've been actually doing drag shows in India way before RuPaul's Drag Race. So, I mean, she stole my idea. But, well, listen, we're an ancient culture, so we're like a lot of ideas are stolen from us. But thanks for that one clap again, whoever it was. Thank you. I have one fan in this room. And clearly not my husband. But coming to policy, I think that we need to now, and that is what the next fight is. So the lawyers that were on the whole reading down of Section 377, amazing set of women that actually won this for us, and I know that they are the ones who are going to win the next step of fights for us. There is issues on housing. There is issues on, because what's happening is that, of course, I'm coming from a privileged place where I'm like, okay, I own a business and I can say I don't give two Fs and walk into a room like that with a purse first. But there are so many kids out there who are in same-sex relationships, and the landlords are not giving them housing. They're kicking them out because they don't understand that. A lot of trans people are not giving housing because they are considered that they will bring sex work to that colony. So I think that the government now needs to step in, and also more than that, the law has to now start protecting the LGBTQ community, not just saying that you're no longer criminals, but now actually giving us some protection classes, just like the rest of the heterosexuals. Burn them.
Yeah, cool.
I know.
Let's burn them.
A wonderful.
Game of Thrones reference.
Well, as an activist, I'm really eager, to work together with corporate business owners who really want to apply the inclusive policies, not only monetize inclusiveness. That's all from me.
That's all from you. And
Yeah.
Naying? And one more final comment, one more final?
Maybe, Mr. Suri, would you like to say anything to other business leaders? Because pushing for D&I, sometimes the business role model are extremely important. what would you like to say to them?
I can say a lot. I can go on and on and
Keep it
on.
short.
I would just say, I think just a repetition of the point earlier, that don't just make it a marketing technique or tool, actually live and breathe inclusion. Going back, make sure that there are trans people that are in every layer of management. Intersex people, make sure that there is the inclusion of the entire LGBTQ spectrum, not just gay men, but pretty much everybody from the LGBTQ.
Wow.
Yes, because sometimes gay men just seem to hog all the conversation and also hog. Yeah, it's true. I am.
Yes, they are.
They do, right? They do. See? And so I think make sure that there is enough representation from each of the rainbow and the spectrum. Yeah, I think that's it. And do drag.
Do drag.
Let's put more than one set of hands together, please, for this group. I think if I was to take one big message away from that, let's support inclusive businesses. There we go. Do please thank Keshav and Lini and Naying. Thank you very much for excellent moderation. Wonderful. We have a break for 30 minutes. Do please join us outside for coffee. Thank you. Well done.